I found out my daughter wasn't mine and that my wife had an affair with my brother for 8 years. They stole Dula 200,000 and planned to run away. I'm writing because I still can't believe what occurred. It all began like any other month. My buddies Hector, Jimmy, Kvyn, Barney, Kent, and I, Greg, have known each other since we were children. We're all in our late 30s and early 40s now. We aim to meet up once a month at my beach property. It's nothing fancy, just a comfy 2-story home that's a little weathered, but it smells like the beach, which I adore. We have an old surfboard hanging on the wall in the Lee Vying room. We were all into surfing back in the day. Anyway, we all have our belongings. Hector is Mr. Organized, and everything has to be just right. He will mend any picture frame that is even a millimeter off. Jimmy, he is the joker. His jokes can be a little bit harsh at times, but he's a wonderful guy at heart. He has a scar on his arm from a fight he got into years ago, but he never talks about it. Kvyn is the quiet one. He's an architect who creates stunning buildings according to my understanding. He had a difficult upbringing, yet he grew up to be okay. Barney is ex-military and doesn't say much about his time and duty, but you can tell he's seen a lot. He is constructed like a brick wall. Kent always seems to have it all. He's a successful lawyer who always dresses nicely and drives a luxury automobile. You know the type. Our get-togethers are rather predictable. We have an old playlist of music from our college years that we always play. Hector is in control of the grill. It's his nice grill, and no one else is permitted to use it. He is quite picky about his grilling. We normally just hang around, eat, drink some beer, and catch up. Hector was particularly worked up this month. He takes out his phone and shows us a photo of his son Andy. In the picture, Andy is scowling and appears to be very angry. Hector claims the school principal called him. Apparently Andy was behaving up, being impolite, not listening to teachers, and his grades were sliding. Hector was beside himself. He continued screaming, "I don't even know who this kid is anymore." He was truly devastated and enraged. We all tried to give counsel, the normal kids go through phases type of thing. Then Jimmy, being Jimmy, cracked a joke. He glanced directly at Hector and said something like, "Maybe he's not yours, man." It was a bad joke, especially given Hector's displeasure. I believe we all squirmed slightly, but it was exacerbated by the fact that he shouted it straight to Hector. Kvyn and then asked in his typical quiet tone, "Why don't you all just get a DNA test, clear the air?" He stated it nonchalantly, as if he were recommending we order pizza. Initially, we all laughed it off. It appeared silly, but the more we joked about it, the more we thought, well, why not? The next day, there we were, 6 mature men stepping into a paternity testing clinic. I had to explain to the receptionist why everyone needed tests. It was very embarrassing. I attempted to make light of it, but she just gave me a blank expression. To make matters worse, Hector's brother Harry and his 2 nephews were with us. The boys continued to ask questions. "Why are we here? Uncle Greg, what are they going to do?" It was embarrassing, and of course, with all of our families present, it evolved into a hugely awkward scene. People were clearly staring. We all took the swabs, paid the cost, and agreed to meet at Kent's apartment the next week to receive the findings. Kent's place is the polar opposite of my beach house. It's everything modern, minimalist, and spotless, almost too beautiful, as if nobody lives there. We sat around attempting to make light talk, but everyone was plainly on edge. Hector took his findings first, as he was the one who initiated everything. He'd been putting on a brave face, but we all knew he was extremely concerned about Andy. The joke Jimmy told had gone under his skin more than he cared to admit. He ripped open the packet, and I watched his expression change from one of fear to one of sheer relief. 99.99 fan tram. He exhaled, leaning back into his chair. Andy was his. He even smiled a little, raking his hands through his hair and muttering about how he was going to ground that youngster for a month for causing him such stress. The other findings were as expected, but we kept looking at Kent, waiting for him to say something. He was unusually quiet, and he was clearly drinking more than he normally did. He was still standing there, and when he finally said, "Jenny isn't mine," he pushed the paper across the table, his hand shaking so violently that he nearly knocked over his beverage. What made things worse was how Kent just stood there staring at nothing, as if he was trying to make sense of figures that couldn't be real. He kept whispering, 25.0 fan tram, like a broken record. In some ways, everything went downhill from there. Hector, in shock, knocked over a glass which smashed on the floor. Jimmy, who had made the initial joke, appeared to want the earth to swallow him whole. Kvyn and simply closed his eyes as if he were trying to block everything out. Barney looked like he was about to punch something, and me, I felt a surge of sickness, relief that my children were mine, and anguish for Kent. It was simply dreadful. The whole affair seemed strange. We sat for hours. The aftermath was a mess. Kent's wife, Audrey, went on the offense first. She stormed into Kent's office. I wasn't there, but I heard about it via Kent. She was yelling at him, calling him a liar, and making a big deal in front of his co-workers. It was very embarrassing for him. Then she attempted to persuade my wife Bella, to her side. She came over to our house, crying, attempting to create a story about Kent misinterpreting everything and how it was all a big mistake. However, Bella is quite sharp. She saw through Audrey's ruse quite immediately. Audrey often changed her story, contradicting herself. Bella later told me that she had gotten a horrible sense from her. Audrey's next tactic was to phone Vy in late at night. She was sobbing and Vy truly asking him to help her, claiming Kent was ruining her life. Vy, in being the nice soul he has, listened to her for a time, but made no promises. He informed me about it the next day, and we were all beginning to see how manipulative Audrey was. The reality emerged gradually. At first, Audrey stated that her romance with Kent's brother Simon was a one-time occurrence, a moment of weakness. Kent naturally did not believe her. He performed some research, possibly even engaged a private investigator. He wouldn't tell for certain. He discovered that the relationship was far longer and more involved than Audrey had previously admitted. The ultimate encounter occurred at their home. I was not present, but Kent informed us about it afterward. Audrey eventually admitted everything. The romance began before their wedding and had continued on and off for years. She also stated that Simon had major financial issues and she had been covertly providing him money, Kent's money, and things got worse. It was more than simply a casual flirtation. They had been meeting in hotels while Kent worked late Vying. He was providing for his family. They even used Kent's automobile occasionally. They celebrated Jenny's birthday like a couple, snapping photos and pretending to be joyful days before Kent's family gathering. Simon had been sending Jenny costly gifts that Kent could never afford, all purchased with money that had been essentially stolen from him. It appeared that he was attempting to buy Jenny's adoration. Is this the lowest blow of all? She would tell Kent she was working late, when in fact she was out with Simon. The financial side of things was completely out of control. These family loans that Audrey had been handing Simon were massive. He'd squandered his money on gambling, lousy investments, and frivolous purchases like a nice watch and sports vehicle. He stated that these were business costs. Audrey had even forged Kent's signature on a few loan paperwork. They made bogus invoices and receipts to hide their tracks. Kent discovered emails between them in which they discussed Vying their husbands and running away together. Everything was laid out in black and white. When everything started spilling out, Audrey began hurriedly phoning everyone, attempting to mitigate the damage. She called me, my wife, and even contacted my parents. It was pathetic. The entire event culminated during Jenny's birthday celebration. It was a spectacular event at a nice restaurant. Everyone was pretending to be joyful. Simon was present, acting smug and touchy-feely with Audrey. It made Kent obviously angry. He kept clenching and unclenching his hands while standing near the exit, as if waiting for Simon to flee. Then, during the toast, Simon mustered the courage to stand up and thanked Kent for being such a wonderful brother and provider. He understood it was all a deception. He handed Jenny a very expensive gift, most likely purchased using Kent's money. He also began bragging to some of the other guests about his own financial triumphs, making Kent look awful by contrast. That was the breaking moment. Kent stepped up, took the DNA test results from his pocket, and displayed them for everybody to see. He stated unequivocally, 25.0 fan tram probability. He then proceeded to deliver this brief, furious speech detailing everything: Audrey and Simon's affair, the falsehoods, and the stolen money. He even showed everyone printed out images of their emails and photos from when they were planning their future together. He made certain that everyone knew about the watch, the car, the extravagant parties, and the fictitious business trip to a tropical island. Kent's mother-in-law gasped and fainted. His father-in-law attempted to punch Kent, but fortunately some other guests pulled him back. Simon attempted to sneak out the back, but Kent's father, who like Barney is ex-military, saw him and knocked him down. It was not pretty. Some individuals attempted to assist, while others simply stood there maliciously watching the entire incident happen. The police were summoned, but they did not take any action. They said it was a domestic disagreement. I later learned that someone had recorded the entire thing on their phone and posted it online. It was not any of us. The consequences were quick and terrible. Kent's dad was outraged. He refused to speak with Simon and proceeded to Simon's flat, where his wife also lived. He grabbed all of Simon's stuff and put them outside the apartment owned by Simon and Kent's father. He subsequently wrote a note to the entire family stating that he no longer regarded Simon as son. He did, however, talk with Kent. He informed him he was disappointed with how things turned out, but he still loved him. Simon's wife, Carrie, had a different narrative. She did more than just yell, she took action. She promptly filed for divorce and locked all of their joint accounts, barring Simon from receiving any additional funds. She retained a lawyer and did not stop there. She went to Kent's house, confronted Audrey, yelled at her, and even smacked her in the face while pulling large chunks of her hair off. I do not condone violence, but I cannot say I blamed her. Carrie eventually began treatment to try to overcome the trauma. Kent, on the other hand, withdrew. He went to one of his beach houses, not mine, but it wasn't as comfortable for him as it had been previously. It seemed like a prison. He would not answer the phone, he would not see anyone. He ordered meals online and stared at the ocean for hours. He later informed me that he had dreams about the DNA test and the overall affair. He really considered selling the property and committing suicide somewhere in a distant wilderness, but he couldn't bring himself to do so. Too many memories. He began drinking extensively to numb the ache. He stopped shaving and changing his clothes. He simply gave up. Meanwhile, Audrey and Simon were residing at Kent's house. Apparently, Simon moved in after getting booted out of his residence. They acted as if nothing had happened. They were seen going on shopping sprees, purchasing pricey clothing and accessories. They were even plotting their escape, working out how to get away from the disaster they had created. It was horrible. They ordered pricey takeout every night while Kent struggled to pay his debts. They had noisy parties which bothered the neighbors. Audrey even began remodeling Jenny's room despite knowing she might have to leave at any time, and Simon the jackass began parking his automobiles in Kent's driveway. Kent started experiencing panic attacks. Just seeing Audrey and Simon together triggered them. He stopped caring for himself. He wasn't showering or eating properly. One day, he accidentally smashed a framed photo of Jenny. He wounded his palm badly on the broken glass, but he didn't appear to notice. That's when we as pals realized we needed to act. We held a meeting at my residence.